In the dying days of the First World War in 1918, the country was ravaged by conflict. Our young people had been sacrificed on the battlefield and our economy was in freefall. And that was the context in which the Forestry Commission was born, to replant, rebuild and renew a crucial asset that seemed impossible to replace. Of course, replacing forests seemed to be an oxymoron. How could native Caledonian pine forests, which were hundreds of years old, be replaced? However, the foresters of old in the 1920s and the 1930s did what was said on the tin. They replanted our forests with fast-growing and mainly, but not exclusively, non-native species. Today, of course, Presiding Officer, we all know the picture is very different. Our living forests play several roles in climate change mitigation, in industry and construction, jobs, biomass, housing, leisure and biodiversity, and that's why today's debate is so important. And of course, politicians meddle with the structure of our forest assets at their peril, and many of us will recall the Conservative government of the mid-1980s who decided not to sell the Forestry Commission, and to be fair, Presiding Officer, that is to their credit. And that's why it beggars belief that the Scottish Government has resuscitated effectively a totally discredited idea under the guise. I'm sorry, Presiding Officer, I don't have time to take interventions today. However, the Minister, who has always struck me as an intelligent, diligent and hard-working Minister, has the opportunity to reject a proposal that even the staunchest SNP supporters scratching their head in disbelief. And can I thank my colleagues for their support with my aspect of my speech. So, where on earth did this idea come from? What evidence is there that there is any support for the idea of leasing vast areas of Scotland's public forests to speculators over the next 75 years? Now, of course, Presiding Officer, I'm not saying that we shouldn't explore options in maximising how our public forests can work for all of us, and Sarah Boyce's already mentioned having joint ventures for renewable projects. But I challenge the Minister in his winding up to explain how the figures stack up in the whole. For example, we're told that the National Forest estate is worth around some £850 million, and the Government wants to raise £200 million from leasing vast areas of forests. But, Presiding Officer, £850 million is the most optimistic valuation given a stable land market. And if the Government floods the market with an enormous area of land, this will lower the price and the value of the assets. That's the market reality. In addition, the Minister has been talking of creating leases with highly restrictive clauses. This will have a negative effect on the value of the assets, so we may be looking at even greater than anticipated areas of Scotland's forests going out of public ownership to raise the necessary cash. Because if this idea is pursued, any future government's ability to manage the forests will be hamstrung for 75 years, irrespective of new knowledge or developments in climate change, in land use or social, economic or environment policy. A quarter of our national forest estate will effectively be exempted from public intervention until 2084. This cannot be right. The Minister tells us this is not a backdoor sale because it's only trees that will be sold. The land itself will remain in public ownership. But the land is relatively worthless without the trees planted in it. And in fact, Presiding Officer, coupled with the length of the leases show that indeed this is asset stripping of almost eye-watering magnitude. And finally, Presiding Officer, could the Minister in his winding up explain why the Government felt it necessary to discuss this proposal with Mrs Thatcher's favourite privatisation consultants, the City of London merchant bankers Rothschild? Could the Minister confirm it was Rothschild's idea to have 75-year leases as the best way to sell off the management rights of Scotland's national forests? Presiding Officer, finally, I hope the Minister was genuine in his repeated assurances that this leasing proposal was not set in stone, and he will indeed look at the pros and cons.